Fog of Love is like a loveless marriage after 40 years. You're meant to be doing it with 2 people, but it's a lot more fun with 4. Fog of Love is a 2-player game about building a relationship. You and your partner will each create a character at the start of the game. They talk about it like a romantic comedy. You'll be given 3 secret character traits that kind of tell you who you are and kind of act like quests for the game, requiring you to have a certain number of these really cute personality tokens down in the right one of these 6 personality dimensions on a stunning and sleekly designed board. Attributes like gentleness, extroversion, or selfishness. For example, this trait of you being horrifically greedy here requires you to have at least 3 tokens in the downward space of the sincerity attribute at the end of the game to achieve it. In contrast, this trait of you being nurturing here requires you to have at least 5 tokens in the upward space of the gentleness attribute between the 2 of you. You also have this happiness card to measure how happy you are individually in this relationship, and fulfilling those character traits will increase your happiness at the end of the game, because you stay true to that greedy and nurturing self that you are. Lastly, you each have these destiny cards, which are kind of like different goals you might have for the relationship, and they require tokens in certain personality attributes and certain happiness levels. And you choose one of these at the end of the game. If you both pick cards that match, like being equal partners or both staying together, then it'll make you both happier. The central mechanic of Fog of Love lies in these scene cards, which you draw and play throughout the game. They give you a simple story scenario that requires either one or both of you to make a decision, ranging from happy things like where should we go for a picnic, the park or the beach, to dramatic things like were you flirting with Sophie from the office?
Me? No? What do you mean? I'm not flirting with Sophie and her beautiful, wide, childbearing hips.
You will pick from a series of answers on the card, A, B, C, or D, placing one of these 4 beautiful and heavy tokens on the board and revealing it. And can I just say, these tokens, they feel so nice. It's like really nice dice. That's what these feel like just going, that is a nice bit of design there. Your answers will impact your happiness, your partner's happiness, and where you put those personality tokens down, helping you achieve those character quests that you got at the start, as well as your destinies. But this is where it gets tricky. Some decisions may fulfill your character traits, but make your partner less happy, or make them happier, but it would mean betraying who you truly are. Is it better for your partner to be happy, but for you to be living a lie, or for you to potentially be a little too honest at points and potentially hurt them? There's even this one scene where it asks you, do I look fat in this? And you've got to give your answer. And there's often an incentive to pick the same answer as your partner, adding this extra layer of complexity where you're trying to figure out a compromise between what you both want and what your partner wants in the first place. Try and guess that. As you place down personality tokens, you'll slowly be able to predict which decisions your partner will make, and thus maximize both of your happiness. See, unlike in other games, the unique skill in Fog of Love isn't in good worker placement or in brilliant resource management or in cunning and strategy, but in reading, understanding, and anticipating your partner. Would my partner prefer cake or a child? The skill set makes it a really unique setup for a very different kind of game, and it's a really cool decision and trade-off to force players to make. And it is genuinely exciting for you both to put down a secret answer in a scene and then reveal it and, you both picked the same answer that matched, like, I want you to propose and you want me to propose, and you realize how beautifully compatible you are. You're on the same page, and it's also equally heartbreaking when, you go into a scene and then you reveal the answers and it doesn't match, and it reveals just how incompatible you are and that it might all be downhill from here. You should have stood up to him when he attacked me like that, but you're telling us that we should just ignore it and walk away? Yeah, there's a lot of moments like that. And eventually, all of these scenes will add up to some kind of story. And at the end of that story, you have to decide whether you want to stick with your partner or break their heart. The greatest praise that I can give Fog of Love is that it does feel like an authentic simulator for a relationship, as far as a board game can be, for weird and wonderful people. But don't be fooled by the soft azure and rosé colours. Your characters and relationship can be of any sexuality or gender you like. And that's really good and inclusive. This game is for everyone. And they have stories for disabled people and other groups. See, games like Dominion can too often lose their theme because it feels like you're constantly solving your own maths problem disguised in medieval apparel. But Fog of Love just is simple, and it never really loses that magic theme that it aims to conjure to the maths. And that's pretty much it. Fog of Love is beautifully simple. You can teach it in like 5 minutes. And speaking of teaching, I do have to give its genius tutorial system a mention. It teaches you through the game through a deck of cards that progressively introduce mechanics and rules as you play through that tutorial and draw more cards. And what's even cooler is that the base game even comes with some stories that more experienced players can roleplay through. But there is one big problem with Fog of Love. It's just not that fun. Those decisions and trade-offs are really cool as an idea, and though there are moments which are heartbreaking or really satisfying, for the large part, they're not, either in the moment or in the long run. The mechanic just doesn't hit that mark very often. Even though you might have goals that are at odds with one another, Fog of Love is not a competitive game, and it doesn't feel good to achieve these goals that were at odds with your partners, even if you have a goal to end the relationship or fulfill who you are. But it's not meant to be competitive, so judging in that way is kind of unfair, except it's also not really a cooperative game either, because it's rarely clear what your common goals are, or even if you share any major goals in common at all. You're really quite beholden to these cards that you were dealt at the beginning of the game. The sad truth is that because of the randomness of your traits and these cards, there are more scenes where you make non-decisions and give yourself tokens that you don't need, and it's common to end up with an entire hand of cards that you don't want to play, or just wouldn't be fun to. And while those destiny cards that I mentioned at the beginning of the game, which are kind of like your end goals for the relationship, you're a love team, or a unconditional love, or self-realization, they're great as a concept, but it too often feels like at the end of the game you were just cornered into picking a certain one, rather than it feeling like it's the result of the work and effort you put into this relationship at the end of the game. And speaking of games, if you are looking for a game, well, it's kind of difficult to know if you did well in Fog of Love, which is kind of a big thing. At the end of the game, we might both choose to stay together, but we're both just kinda miserable. Or maybe we break up, but only one of us is incredibly happy. Or maybe you're both moderately happy, but neither of you achieved any of your character traits, meaning you didn't stay to who you are, stay true to who you are. Is that good? It doesn't always feel like you're working together towards success. It feels more like you're both compromising your own happiness to achieve a kind of equilibrium. Neither feeling ecstatic to achieve personal goals like your traits, but also not really that great to achieve combined goals either. In other words, getting good at Fog of Love I didn't feel was personally that fulfilling. When things do go fantastically in the relationship, it's often just because these goals that you were given at the start of the game happened to line up pretty well. And not from meaningfully reading the other person and anticipating their wants and needs and who they are and getting to know them as the designers probably intended. See, the unfortunate trouble is that Fog of Love rarely gives you that wow, we did so well moment where you both made smart, critical, thoughtful decisions and got the results that you were wanting. And you would be forgiven for thinking that a game like Fog of Love would let you create an arc across the entire story that you slowly build up into a heartbreaking or romantic crescendo that pays off at the end. But that's just not really the case. See, these scenes are so disconnected from one another that it doesn't really allow for that sort of story. There is some vague structure to it, especially in those story packs that they give you in the game, but it's pretty loose on the whole. Now, to the designer's credit, this does fit thematically with what they were going for. Relationships. Relationships don't have those gamifying moments of crescendo and victory or anything like that. And the endings of, we broke up but one of us is incredibly happy, or we're both moderately happy but we're not staying true to who we are, that's kind of how relationships work. They're complicated. But that doesn't make it a good game. But Tim, you tell me, Fog of Love isn't meant to be about the game, about the strategy or the thinking or the playing. It's meant to be about the role-playing and the characters, and if you care about them, then it's a good game, right? You're caring about their story and who they are and how they develop. Well, yeah, that's the theory, but Fog of Love feels like it falls pretty short in this regard as well. While you can play through stories, there's Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, Chapter 3, 4, and the finale, they only really give a vague structure to how things work out, so it doesn't give the narrative as strong a through line as it could. And while you do create a character at the start with a name and traits and occupation and features, many of those things are either randomly dealt to you or out of your control entirely, so they're never really your character, which is really key to caring about them and their story. These strictures mean that while role-playing is possible in Fog of Love, it's never as enjoyable as it is in games with either more vivid and cohesive pre-made characters or ones that give you more creative freedom with who you play as. Fog of Love is, in this vein, very person-to-person dependent as to whether the role-playing will be good, and thus whether you will enjoy Fog of Love. And I played this game with role-players, people who like D&D, people who play it consistently and weekly. And with that, you may have a consistently immersive game, and Fog of Love may be great for you. But in my experience, the stories that you create with these characters that you are given ranges from, that was fun, to, that was boring. And for me, that's just not enough. And ranging usually from 1.5 to 2 freaking hours, I really need to be given just a little bit more. The beast needs to be fed. But there is another but, a very, very important but. Said but a lot. There is one giant caveat to all of this. Fog of Love does, as I've explained, fall kinda flat as a 2-player game as it was designed, because the mechanics are either too luck-based or inconsistent, and role-playing just isn't that immersive. But Fog of Love can be fun, can be immersive, can be incredibly funny, if you're not playing to be good at it, but just make one another laugh. Especially if you've got 2 or even 4 people controlling the same character, and you've got these mix of personalities as everyone kind of hashes over what the decisions would be. It can be fun if you embrace the randomness of the characters that you're given at the start, and you're giving them strange, weird backstories just to get each other laughing, and every reveal becomes dramatic, and you play it up, and you might have fun playing Fog of Love. It's like how the real fun in Pictionary isn't in winning, isn't in drawing good drawings. It's always in the terrible drawings. It's in going, hey, this is clearly a donkey! It's clearly a donkey. And everyone just goes, it looks like a Ferris wheel. It looks like I swear it's a Ferris wheel. And in that vein, Fog of Love's simplicity really plays to its strength. It becomes a kind of fun party game that you can break out when you've got groups of people around, when you're tired or drinking and you don't have the energy to bust out Scythe or Spirit Island. It can be a light-hearted game that you don't really need to finish if you don't want to. And if you let go of that idea that you can do badly at the game, will allow us to have a lot more fun. Now, I'm sure that there are people with whom Fog of Love will really resonate, that it will be a game that they will love and consistently so. And if that's you, I envy you, but it's just not for me. Fog of Love isn't a game that I'll be busting out when I'm looking for some role-playing, and it won't be the one that I'll bring out when I'm looking for a cooperative game, and it won't be one that I bring out when I'm looking for a diplomatic game. But it might be the one that I bring out at 1 AM on a Saturday morning, when I want to laugh about Meredith, the professional lumberjack who is okay, who works all night, and works all day. This is Fog of Love. Stay nerdy, and I'll see you in the future.